Welcome to Faith Wonders, where real stories of faith and miracles come alive from around the world.
They said the courtroom had never been so silent. Not when billionaires were tried. Not when high-profile murderers stood trembling before the gavel. Not even when senators sat in the defendant's chair. But on that morning, silence had a different weight. It wasn't the silence of fear. It wasn't the silence of respect. It was the silence of disbelief, of hundreds of eyes locked on a child who had just spoken words so absurd, so impossible, that even the stenographer's hands froze above the keys. She was no taller than the judge's desk. Her hair was tied with a faded ribbon. Her dress, a hand-me-down that had been washed too many times, clung loosely to her small frame. Her shoes were scuffed, the soles barely hanging on. And yet, her voice carried like a trumpet through the air. "Release my father, and the Virgin Mary will make you walk again." A ripple ran through the room. First came the gasps, then came the laughter. Courtrooms are rarely kind places. They are theaters of logic, of evidence, of cold, hard proof. But in that instant, it turned into something else entirely, a stage for ridicule. The attorneys chuckled under their breath. The journalists scribbled gleefully, already drafting sensational headlines. A bailiff muttered, "Poor kid's lost her mind." Even the prosecutor, with his perfect tie and smug smile, couldn't contain a short burst of laughter. And then the floodgates opened. Dozens of voices, mocking, sneering, scoffing, filled the chamber. The sound of it rattled against the marble walls. They weren't laughing at her words. They were laughing at the idea of faith itself. Yet one man did not laugh. One man whose iron will had sentenced hundreds to prison, whose cold gaze had earned him the name the Iron Judge, simply stared. Judge Jonathan Reed, 15 years bound to a wheelchair. 15 years since that rainy night when twisted metal crushed his legs and extinguished his belief in miracles. 15 years of delivering verdicts with no mercy, as if the loss of his body had also stripped away his soul. For the first time in those 15 years, Jonathan Reed felt something he did not recognize. Not pain, not anger, but hesitation. The laughter swelled around him, but it faded in his ears. He could hear only the echo of the child's voice, clear, steady, unwavering. "Release my father, and the Virgin Mary will make you walk again." Walk again. Two words Jonathan Reed had buried so deep in the grave of his memory that hearing them now felt like a cruel resurrection. His fingers tightened on the arms of his wheelchair, his jaw clenched, his heart, cold and mechanical for years, thumped with an unfamiliar rhythm. Who was this child? Why did she dare to speak as though heaven itself had sent her? And why, despite every hardened wall inside him, did her words not feel like nonsense, but like a challenge? The courtroom continued to roar with laughter, but slowly, a strange thing began to happen. Some of the jurors stopped smiling. Some of the reporters put down their pens. Even the prosecutor's smirk wavered ever so slightly. Because though they laughed, the child did not. She stood there, unflinching, her little hands clutching a rosary worn smooth from prayers too many for her young years. Her lips trembled, but not with fear, with determination. Her eyes, wide and innocent, seemed to look straight through the judge into the man he used to be. The laughter faltered. The silence returned. And in that silence, Judge Reed felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken things pressing down on his chest. He remembered the nights he lay awake, staring at his useless legs, cursing God. He remembered the funeral of his wife, who had whispered before her last breath, "Don't let bitterness destroy you." He remembered the boy he once was, full of dreams, full of fire, full of faith. All of it now stared back at him in the form of a 7-year-old girl. The irony was unbearable. A child spoke of walking as though it were a gift to be given back at will. A child claimed the Virgin Mary herself would intervene in a courtroom where lawyers thrived on facts, not faith. A child, this fragile, trembling soul, stood against the laughter of hundreds and did not break. And deep inside, beneath layers of scars, Jonathan Reed felt something crack. The gavel was still in his hand. The case was still before him. Logic demanded he dismiss the outburst. Procedure demanded he silence the girl. Decorum demanded she be removed from the court immediately. But Jonathan Reed did none of those things. Instead, he whispered words so soft that only he could hear them. "What if she's right?" And in that instant, the story of a lifetime began. His name was Jonathan. To the world, he was known by a colder title, the Iron Judge. For 15 long years, Jonathan presided over courtrooms with the reputation of being merciless. He rarely smiled. He rarely showed any hint of emotion. Lawyers whispered, "If you land in Reed's courtroom, expect the harshest sentence." Justice here is not tempered by compassion. But before the wheelchair became a permanent part of his life, Jonathan was someone entirely different. He had once been a devoted husband, a loving father, and a man who believed that justice and mercy could walk hand in hand. He used to play basketball with friends, run marathons, laugh without restraint, and wake each day with hope. Then came that stormy night. The car skidded on a wet mountain road. Twisted metal spared his life, but stole the use of his legs forever. And as if that weren't enough, 1 year later, cancer claimed his wife. Her last words still haunted him. "Jonathan, don't let bitterness destroy you." But bitterness was all that remained. It crept into every fiber of his being. It turned him into the Iron Judge, cold, severe, and seemingly lifeless inside. Not far away, another man was fighting his own battle with fate. Daniel Carter. Daniel was 45, a gardener by trade. Calloused hands, quiet demeanor, steady heart. For over 3 years since his wife's passing, he raised his 7-year-old daughter Lily alone. Their home was modest but warm. The walls were covered with Lily's colorful drawings. On a small shelf stood a statue of the Virgin Mary, and beside it, her late mother's worn rosary beads. Daniel was respected by neighbors, trusted by his community. But one December morning shattered everything. He was arrested, accused of robbing a jewelry store. The evidence seemed undeniable. A blurry security camera showing someone who resembled him. A witness swearing they had seen him near the scene. Cell phone records placing him in the area. And worst of all, a stolen piece of jewelry found in the trunk of his truck. Daniel cried out in despair from his prison cell. "I swear on my wife's memory, I didn't do this. My daughter has already lost her mother. She cannot lose her father too." But in the midst of this nightmare, there was one light that never dimmed: Lily's faith. Every night, the little girl knelt beside her bed, clutching her mother's rosary in her tiny hands. Her voice was soft but steady as she prayed. "Virgin Mary, please save my daddy. Let the truth be seen. And please, open the heart of the judge." What was most remarkable was not that Lily prayed for her father's freedom, but that she prayed for a man she had never met, Judge Jonathan Reed. On one side, a bitter judge bound by a wheelchair and a heart frozen for 15 years. On the other, an innocent father, falsely accused, staring at the loss of everything he held dear. And between them, a 7-year-old child whose prayers would soon shake the walls of a courtroom and awaken something long buried in the coldest of hearts. None of them knew it yet, but the trial that awaited them would not only decide a man's innocence or guilt, it would change the destiny of everyone who stepped into that courtroom forever.
The morning of the trial arrived with a strange heaviness in the air. Outside the courthouse, journalists gathered with cameras, eager for another story that would showcase the severity of Judge Jonathan Reed. To them, this was just another headline: "Gardener faces harsh sentence in jewelry robbery case." But for Daniel Carter and his daughter Lily, it was the day their lives would either crumble completely or be saved by a miracle. Lily held Mrs. Thompson's hand, the elderly neighbor who had taken her in since her father's arrest. She wore her best dress, pale blue, the same color as the mantle of the Virgin Mary. In her backpack, carefully wrapped, was her mother's rosary. She clutched it like a soldier clutches a sword. When Daniel was led into the courtroom, shackled, wearing the faded orange of a prisoner, his eyes immediately searched for his daughter. He found her. She smiled at him, a brave, trembling smile that pierced his heart. "Stay strong, Daddy. The Virgin Mary will help us," her lips seemed to whisper. Daniel forced a smile back, though inside, fear gripped him like iron chains. Then came the sound everyone had been waiting for, the side door opening. The bailiff's voice rang out, cold and official. "All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Jonathan Reed presiding." The room stood. Silence fell.
Jonathan Reed entered, rolling his wheelchair forward with deliberate precision. His expression was carved from stone. His steel gray eyes scanned the room. For most people, it felt like standing under the gaze of a hawk circling its prey. But when his eyes briefly passed Lily, something inside him stirred. He felt it again, the strange tightness in his chest, the memory of who he once was. He pushed it down instantly. "This is a court of law," he said firmly, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Not a place for sentiment. We will deal with facts and facts alone." Prosecutor David Chen rose with a smug confidence. His voice was calm, sharp, rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, pacing slowly. "This is a simple case. The evidence is clear. The crime was brutal. A jewelry store robbed in the dead of night, and the man responsible sits right here before you, Daniel Carter." He presented everything with cold precision. The grainy camera footage of a figure resembling Daniel, the witness testimony, the cell phone records, and finally, the jewel found in Daniel's truck.
Chen turned toward the jury, his words striking like hammer blows. "The evidence is irrefutable. Mr. Carter is guilty. He must pay the price." As he sat down, a heavy silence filled the room. The jurors exchanged glances. The spectators nodded. The case already felt sealed. Then came Daniel's lawyer, Mark Williams, a public defender drowning in too many cases and too few resources. His suit was slightly wrinkled, his eyes weary. He did his best. He questioned the clarity of the camera footage. He challenged the reliability of the witness. He suggested that the jewel might have been planted. He called neighbors to testify about Daniel's honesty and good character. But against the mountain of evidence, his words fell like feathers against stone. Judge Reed watched, unmoved. His face betrayed nothing. Yet somewhere inside, he noticed Lily sitting quietly, her small hands gripping the rosary and her lips moving silently in prayer. Hours passed. The arguments were made, evidence reviewed, witnesses examined. Now came the final moment. Prosecutor Chen stood once more. His voice rose with theatrical certainty. "Ladies and gentlemen, justice demands that we convict this man. To let him walk free would be to mock the law itself. The facts speak for themselves. Daniel Carter is guilty."
The words echoed like a death sentence. Defense Attorney Williams tried one last desperate appeal. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice heavy with exhaustion, "before you decide, look at the man before you. A father, a neighbor, a man who has never committed a crime in his life. Look at his daughter, sitting right there. If we are wrong, even by the smallest chance, are we willing to destroy this family forever? Are we willing to rob a child of her only parent?" But his words floated like smoke in the air and faded. The jurors' faces remained unchanged. Judge Reed adjusted his glasses. His hand rested on the gavel. His voice, sharp and cold, cut through the silence. "Daniel Carter, after careful review of the evidence, this court finds..." "Wait!" The word cut through the air like lightning. Every head turned. A small figure was stepping into the aisle. Lily. Mrs. Thompson tried to hold her back, but the girl shook free. Her little shoes tapped against the polished floor as she walked toward the center of the courtroom. The murmur began. "What is she doing? Who let her speak?" Judge Reed's brows furrowed. "Child, return to your seat immediately. This is highly irregular." But Lily's voice, trembling yet clear, rang out. "My name is Lily Carter. I am Daniel Carter's daughter, and I need to speak before you make a terrible mistake." The courtroom gasped. Lawyers stiffened. A child had just defied the most feared judge in Texas. Reed leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You have 1 minute." Curiosity betraying his cold mask. Lily reached into her backpack. Slowly, carefully, she pulled out her mother's rosary. The beads were worn smooth, glistening faintly under the courtroom lights. She held it up for everyone to see. "Your Honor," she said, her voice shaking but firm, "my daddy didn't do this, and the Virgin Mary will prove it." The room erupted. Laughter, sharp and cruel, filled the air. Some whispered mockery, others chuckled openly. Even Prosecutor Chen smirked. "Poor child," someone muttered. "She's lost her mind," another sneered. Judge Reed pounded his gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" But Lily's voice rose above the chaos. "If you let my daddy go, the Virgin Mary will make you walk again." The laughter exploded. It echoed against the marble walls. Journalists scribbled furiously, savoring the absurdity. Some people clapped mockingly as if it were a theater play. "She's crazy," someone shouted. "What nonsense," another scoffed. But Lily did not flinch. She knelt right there in the center of the courtroom. Hundreds of eyes upon her, hundreds of voices mocking her, and she began to pray out loud. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." Her small voice cut through the noise like a blade of faith. Some laughed louder, but others began to fall silent. "Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus." Her tears slipped down her cheeks, but her voice did not waver. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen." And, as the words echoed, something happened that defied reason, logic, and science. Judge Jonathan Reed felt a tingling in his legs.
It began as the faintest sensation, a tingling, a warmth, something so foreign to him that his mind recoiled in disbelief. 15 years of emptiness below the waist, 15 years of lifeless nerves, and now this. He clenched the wooden armrests of his wheelchair until his knuckles turned white. "No," he whispered to himself. "It's not real. It can't be." But it was. The warmth spread like waves of fire and light, coursing down into his calves, into his ankles, into his very toes. All the while, the thin, unwavering voice of a child rang through the air like a silver bell. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." The laughter that had once filled the courtroom began to falter. Whispers replaced it. Dozens of eyes shifted from the kneeling little girl to the judge, whose face was changing before them. Jonathan tried to mask it. He tried to sit still, to remain the stoic iron judge he had been for so many years, but his body betrayed him. His chest rose and fell in uneven bursts. His lips trembled. And then, impossibly, he pushed against the armrests. The sound of wheels scraping echoed in the chamber as the chair shifted backward. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A bailiff dropped his notepad to the ground. Judge Jonathan Reed was rising to his feet. For the first time in 15 years, the man once bound to his chair was standing. The courtroom erupted. Shouts, cries, gasps, prayers. Some people stumbled backward in shock. Others fell to their knees, crossing themselves with tears streaming down their faces. A journalist's camera clattered to the floor, forgotten. And in the center of it all, the judge stood trembling, his legs weak but undeniably alive beneath him. He turned toward the little girl still kneeling on the cold marble floor. Her blue dress rippled as she clasped her rosary tight, tears wetting her cheeks, but her voice never wavered. "Pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen." "Child," Jonathan's voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. His eyes glistened with tears he had not allowed himself in over a decade. "You prayed for me?" Lily lifted her gaze, innocence shining through her tears. "Not just for my daddy, for you too."
The fortress of ice around Jonathan's heart shattered. 15 years of bitterness, despair, and anger dissolved in a single moment. His knees buckled, but not from weakness, rather from surrender. He fell forward, kneeling right there in front of the statue of the Virgin Mary mounted on the wall. For the first time since his wife's death, the Iron Judge wept. As the judge's sobs echoed through the chamber, another sound rose from the back of the room, a trembling voice, broken with guilt. "Stop! Stop this! I can't carry it anymore!" All eyes turned. A man in the gallery had collapsed, clutching his face. It was the eyewitness who had sworn he'd seen Daniel Carter at the crime scene. His body shook as he cried out, "It wasn't him! Daniel is innocent! I lied! I was paid to lie! The real thief, he gave me money to frame Daniel! I couldn't live with it anymore! And now, after what I've just seen, I can't stay silent!" The gallery erupted in gasps. At that same moment, a detective rushed forward, speaking urgently to Prosecutor Chen. The color drained from his face as he stammered to the judge, "Your Honor, New forensic analysis just came in. The fingerprints at the jewelry store, they don't match Mr. Carter. They belong to another man with a criminal record. And the jewel in his truck? The lock was tampered with. Evidence suggests it was planted. The courtroom dissolved into chaos. Lawyers shouted. Reporters scribbled frantically. The public defender covered his mouth in shock. And Daniel Carter, sitting in his prison uniform, collapsed forward, sobbing uncontrollably. Judge Reed, still on his feet, still trembling, raised his hands to quiet the storm. His voice, raw with emotion, thundered through the room. This court, after reviewing the evidence and in light of these confessions, finds that Daniel Carter is innocent of all charges. He is hereby released immediately and unconditionally. The words seemed to echo for eternity. And then the dam broke. Lily screamed with joy, rushing toward her father. "Daddy!" Daniel fell to his knees as the guards removed his chains, pulling his daughter into his arms. He wept into her hair, rocking her as though he would never let go again. The courtroom was no longer a hall of law. It was a cathedral of tears. Strangers embraced. Some knelt in prayer. Others simply stared in stunned silence, knowing they had witnessed something that defied all logic, all science, all expectation. Jonathan Reed walked toward Daniel and Lily. His steps were shaky, but they were real. The Iron Judge was no more. He stood not as an untouchable figure of law, but as a man humbled, reborn. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder, his voice breaking. "I have been blind for so long. I thought justice was cold, detached, unfeeling. But your daughter, she reminded me that true justice must walk hand in hand with mercy." Then he turned to Lily. And for the first time in years, Jonathan Reed smiled, truly smiled. "You saved your father, and you saved me. You reminded me I still had a heart." Lily beamed through her tears. "The Virgin Mary healed you." Jonathan's voice trembled as he replied, "Yes, child. Through your faith, she healed not just my body, but my soul." News of what happened that day spread like wildfire. Headlines across Texas screamed, "Judge walks after 15 years in wheelchair. Declares innocent man free. Miracle in the courtroom. Child's prayer changes everything." But for those who were there, the miracle was more than a headline. It was something sacred, a memory they would carry until their dying breath. In the weeks that followed, the Iron Judge disappeared. In his place stood Jonathan Reed, a man of compassion, of humility, of newfound faith. His rulings changed, his heart opened, and every step he took was a reminder of grace. As for Daniel, he returned home with Lily, their lives scarred, but their spirits unbroken. And Lily never stopped praying. She kept her promise to the Virgin Mary. Every night she whispered, "Thank you for saving my daddy, and thank you for saving the judge too." And Jonathan Reed himself, though still cautious, grew stronger with each passing month. Doctors shook their heads in disbelief. Nerve regeneration, they called it. Medically extraordinary. But Jonathan knew better. It was not science alone. It was a gift, a miracle.
News of the courtroom miracle spread quickly. Within a single day, the story reached newspapers and television screens far beyond Texas. People debated it endlessly. Was it truly divine intervention, or just coincidence? Yet those who had sat in that room, who had seen the judge rise from his chair, knew deep in their hearts that something greater than human explanation had taken place. For Jonathan Reed, everything changed. Once known as the Iron Judge, feared for his merciless rulings, he now carried himself differently. His voice was softer, his eyes no longer cold. He still enforced the law, but he did so with a compassion no one had ever seen in him before. He began attending church quietly on Sundays, slipping into the back pew. Each time he knelt, he whispered a prayer of gratitude. "Thank you, Mother Mary, for not abandoning me." He understood that the real miracle was not only the strength returning to his legs, but the thawing of his hardened heart. For Daniel Carter, the days after his release felt almost unreal. Years of hopelessness fell away each time he looked at his daughter. Lily had not only prayed for his freedom, she had carried his faith when he no longer could. One evening, as they sat together with the rosary on the table between them, Daniel told her softly, "I thought I had to protect you, but it was you who protected me." Lily simply smiled, her small hand resting in his. Their small town never forgot what had happened. Some doubted, others argued, but for many it rekindled faith. The church pews filled again. Neighbors told and retold the story of the girl who knelt before the Virgin Mary and changed not only a trial, but a man's entire life.
Mrs. Williams, who had cared for Lily during Daniel's imprisonment, often said, "Sometimes it isn't the strong who move mountains. It's the faith of a child." Jonathan Reed's legs grew stronger with each passing month. By year's end, he could walk without a cane. But more important than his steps was the path he had chosen for his life. No longer bitter, no longer empty, he had become a man willing to listen, to forgive, and to believe. One spring afternoon, Jonathan visited the Carters' modest home. He carried nothing but a bouquet of flowers. Standing before Lily, he said quietly, "You saved me. Not just my body, but my soul." Lily shook her head gently. "It wasn't me. It was the Virgin Mary. I just asked her with all my heart." Jonathan's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, he truly believed. Why does this story matter to you, listening now? Because miracles are not locked away in history books. They are not limited to courtrooms or churches. They happen wherever faith dares to exist. Maybe you too carry a burden. Maybe your heart feels as cold as Judge Reed's once did, or your hope feels as fragile as Daniel's behind prison walls. But remember this: it took only one child's prayer, simple, pure, unwavering, to open heaven's door. The miracle of Judge Reed and the Carters was not only about walking again or proving innocence. It was about faith stronger than doubt, love stronger than despair, and mercy greater than justice. So tonight, let this story be more than just words. Let it remind you that even when the world laughs at faith, heaven still listens. Even when hope seems lost, grace is never far away. And who knows? The next miracle may not belong to them. It may belong to you.